Well, ladies and gentlemen, may I have your attention, please? Our session is about to begin. Please stand by and keep your camera open and microphone on mute. His Excellency, Lecturer in Low Carbon Energy at Nottingham, Trent University, UK, Mr. Arthur Williams. The Honorable Alumni of the University of Nottingham, UK, who also our moderator for today, Ms. Dianti Utami Dewi, and also all of the participants, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Peace be upon you. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the first ever International Energy Talk with the theme Energy Storage Paving the Way for a Sustainable Future. Today, December 17, 2023, I am Andi Nurul Naya, your MC for this Energy Talk webinar today. On behalf of the Social Renewable Energy Universitas Hasanuddin, we would like to extend a warm welcome and be honored to have all of you join us today as we embark on this incredible journey of knowledge, innovation, and collaboration. This Energy Talk webinar aims to increase public understanding about new renewable energy and face future energy challenges. Before we proceed, let us take a moment to express our deepest gratitude to all the organizer and media partners, Alliance Franchise Makassar, NutriHub Makassar, ISEC, Even Unhas, GreenWelfare.id, Unhas Career Woman, SRI Universitas Jember, SRI Universitas Telkom, SRI Universitas Airlangga, SRI Institut Teknologi Bandung, SRI Institut Teknologi Kalimantan, and also SRI Universitas Tanjung Pura, who have made this webinar possible. We are truly grateful for their unwavering support. Now, without further ado, let us begin International Energy Talk, paving the way for a sustainable future, where you can gain insight from industry experts, discuss issues, and ask questions pertaining to new and renewable energy. Excellencies, distinguished guest participants, ladies and gentlemen, to inaugurate this remarkable event, I would like to invite the President of Social Renewable Energy, Universitas Hasanuddin, to give a welcoming remarks. Mr. Afla Fikri Mahmud, time is yours.
Thank you, Inaya, for the opportunity. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good afternoon, everyone, for Indonesia's local time, and good morning for United Kingdom's local time. A warm welcome to all of you at the International Energy Talk. I'm so excited to be here as we delve into an important topic, energy storage, paving a way for a sustainable future. We are so excited to share that over 200 people have signed up for our event today. It's amazing to see such a big turnout and shows how much interest there is in sustainable energy. Thanks to each and every one of you for joining us today. Ladies and gentlemen, today is our third webinar in this series, which is the last webinar in this year, where in our PR event, we bring together researchers, policymakers, NGOs, and influencers to explore how we can make our energy use more sustainable. It's a pleasure to have Mr. Arthur Williams for today's event, which is a lecturer in low carbon energy from Nottingham Trent University. His insights into low carbon energy are sure to be enlightening. Thank you very much, Mr. Arthur Williams, for taking the time to share your insights today. Your presence means a lot to us, especially to the Society of Renewable Energy in Hasanuddin University. Additionally, we would like to say thank you to Ms. Dianti Utami Dewi, who is the host for today's activity. She has supported us a lot to brainstorm related to the topic of energy storage in today's activity. As the president of the Society of Renewable Energy in Hasanuddin University, I'm honored to kick off today's session. Our goal is represented in our organization's vision, along with more than 40 other student chapters of Society of Renewable Energy in Indonesia, which is to accelerate energy transition in Indonesia through youth empowerment and multi-institutional collaboration. Events like this help us learn, share ideas, and work towards a greener and more sustainable future. Once again, a big thank you to Mr. Arthur Williams and Ms. Dianti Utami Dewi, as well as all the participants for being a part of today's Energy Talk. That's all from me. Thank you very much and hope you enjoy the Energy Talk. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Mr. Afla Fikri Mahmud, for the very warm welcome. Ladies and gentlemen, now we have come to our main agenda, the webinar session. The section will be moderated by our moderator. It's my pleasure right now to tell you about our incredible moderator, Ms. Dianti Utami Dewi, who is an expert and passionate about sustainable and renewable energy. She graduated with a Bachelor Engineering degree from Universitas Hasanuddin, also postgraduate certificate in Electrical Engineering for Sustainable and Renewable Energy from the University of Nottingham, UK, and Master of Engineering from Universitas Hasanuddin. Some of her conference experience was a presenter at the first International Conference on Artificial Intelligence, Robotics, Signal and Image Processing on August 2023, and a secretary committee on the 18th International Student Conference on Advanced Science and Technology on September 2023. For organizational experience, she was head of the Education Department in Mata Garuda, Sulawesi Selatan, and she worked as project administrator at PT Solar Power Indonesia, Bali, and she is currently working as an English tutor in Spain. Ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Miss Dianti Utami Dewi.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Nurul Inayah. Thank you for having me here for this energy talks, the third energy talks about energy storage, paving the way for a sustainable future. Okay, so before we start this meeting, so I want to introduce you about the speaker today, Mr. Arthur Williams. It's an honor to have you here, Mr. Arthur. So he graduated from St. John's College, Oxford, finished his BA in Engineering Science, and PhD from Nottingham Trent University, where his dissertation is Pump as Turbines for Micro Hydropower in 1992. So for the working experience from 1997 to 2020, he has a full-time academic at both Nottingham Trent and University of Nottingham, teaching various engineering subjects. So, and he was also a course director for MSc course in Electrical Engineering and Renewable Energy, University of Nottingham. And after he retired, he still continued to teach at Nottingham Trent University and University of Oviedo in Spain. So he also contribute to research and training collaboration with practical action in Malaysia, Borneo. Okay, maybe if you come to Malaysia, Borneo, you can come visit also Indonesian Borneo, Mr. Arthur. Okay, so now I will invite you to start the presentation. Time is yours.
Okay. So, right. Sorry, I need to find my right correct slide. Sorry. Yeah. Sitting here. Yeah. Yes, is that all working? And you can hear me okay?
Yes, Mr. Arthur.
Yes, good. So, I'm going to talk about energy storage and starting off looking at the changes in the electrical grid. I'm going to use a lot of examples from the UK grid because one thing that it's a grid that I know about, but also in some ways the UK grid has been at the forefront of changes in the way that the grid has worked. It was really the first grid to become deregulated in the sense that it had an electricity market set up. So the role of storage on the electrical grid in the UK is linked quite a lot to the way that the electrical market works. So I will talk about a little bit about the electrical market and the overall changes on the grid, and then have a look at different types of energy storage, what's available and how they can be used. And then at the end, just quickly, I'm going to go through some energy storage research that I've been involved in with different research students over the recent past. So the way that the grid works, well, I guess it's the same in Indonesia. The original way that the grid was set up was with large power stations connected into a transmission network which is a two-way network which can send power around the country. And then at various points, there are substations connecting off for the distribution network, which works then at a slightly lower voltage. And then the distribution network was designed as a one-way system to take the power from the transmission system and deliver it to the consumers, industrial consumers, commercial consumers, and residential consumers. So this was the way that the grid was set up originally. But as things have changed recently, what's happened is that the grid has started to integrate some renewable energy. And that renewable energy is at two levels in the system. So in the UK, we have quite big offshore wind farms, for instance, which are connected in at the transmission level. So they can they are connected into the highest voltage level, which in the UK is actually 400 kV, and they then distribute power across the whole country. But there are also a lot of renewable energy systems which are connected in at the distribution voltage level. So they might be small wind turbines, they might be PV panels on homes. And what we have now is some of the people who would have been consumers, or organizations that would have been consumers of electricity, are now what we call prosumers. That is, that they produce as well as consume electricity. And this causes some issues for the grid, because we now have a distribution network which was designed for single direction flow of energy from the transmission system to the consumer, and at times it's working as a two-way system. So at certain times there will be electricity that will flow from the distribution system back up to the transmission system. So this is not how the system was designed, and can cause some issues in terms of voltage levels at the local level. So that's one issue that we find with the increasing amount of renewable energy on the system. Now we also need to take into account what are the daily demand profiles on the grid, and this is showing UK typical demand profiles. We have quite a big difference between winter demand and summer demand because of the change in climate. We're currently in winter. It's actually at the moment it's quite mild. It's like 8 degrees outside. But a few weeks ago, this time of day, it might have been only 2 degrees outside. So then there is a lot of heating demand on the system. And what you see is typical grid demand is low in the nighttime and then ramps up in the morning when everyone wakes up, is fairly constant through the daytime, and then it ramps up again in the evening when, because of our short days in the winter, there is a more lighting load and there is additional heating load as people return home after work, etc. So we have a peak in the evening, and that peak is a challenge to meet because obviously there is a fixed capacity on the grid, and we need to be able to meet that peak demand. So that's also where energy storage comes into play. And you may not be aware of this, but there's a key difference between electricity and gas in terms of energy storage. I'm guessing, I haven't checked this, but I'm guessing that in Indonesia, you also have some piped gas system because you're a gas producing nation, as we have in the UK. And in the gas system, the gas network itself, which is a set of pipelines, is used as storage. So the pressure in the gas can be built up overnight, and there's enough gas in the pipeline to last for more than 24 hours, even at winter peak demand. So what happens is that the gas is pumped into the system and it's used when it's needed. With electricity, you can't store electrons in the cables. Whatever goes in has to come out at the other end. So we have quite a limited capacity for energy storage with the electricity grid. And what happens if demand increases? Well, for those who are electrical engineers, you will probably know that when there is higher demand on the system, the generators start to slow down, the frequency drops, and automatic control kicks in and opens valves in steam turbines, etc. And the power system compensates for the increase in demand by increasing the power going into the system. So we have a control system that can balance the power supply and the power demanded. Of course, at some times that may also have big changes. So in the grid operator actually needs to predict what load demands will be in order to schedule the power stations to give the right input to the system. And they use weather forecasts, TV schedules are quite important, and actually load prediction can be quite difficult, particularly for smaller grids where there's less averaging on the system. And energy storage can then be used to help even out these changes between energy demanded and energy supplied. Then there are issues with the green renewable sources, particularly those that are intermittent, and some of those are not only intermittent but unpredictable. So wind power, for instance, is difficult to forecast exactly how much wind power will be produced at any one time. So we also, the renewable energy resources generally cannot be used to respond to changes in demand. So gas or coal-fired generators, particularly gas-fired generators, you can increase and decrease the output quite quickly. The only renewable energy where you can do that is hydropower, where you have storage reservoirs. And in that case, you can turn up and down the output from the hydro turbines. And that will help in terms of balancing energy supply and demand. And one of the issues in integrating renewable energy onto the grid is that the best wind or hydro resources are often remote from the centres of population. So you have to have a strong enough grid to be able to take that power to where it's needed. And also the renewable energy generators tend to have low capacity factors. So they have a large power capacity relative to the total electricity that they generate. And that's particularly the case for solar power, and it means that when there's a lot of sun, of course, there may be sun across quite a wide area of the country, and you then get large amounts of power which need to be absorbed by the system. So in Indonesia, you have some geothermal energy. That's actually got a slightly different issue, which is that it generally runs at fixed output. It's not easy to turn it off. It's not an intermittent supply like solar or wind, but it also contributes to the issue of how do you match supply and demand, because in terms of geothermal energy, it has a fixed supply. So in the UK, we have made big changes over the last 20, 25 years to our electricity system. So we used to rely for about 40% of our power back 30 years ago. We relied on coal-fired power stations. Virtually all of those have closed now. You can see that our coal supplies less than 2% of power in the country, and the rest is split between gas and renewable energy. And so that renewable energy is mainly, in the UK, it's mainly wind, some solar, and some biomass. We also have nuclear power stations, which you don't have in Indonesia. Nuclear power stations, also like the geothermal, they are not easy to turn off. So they are a bit of a problem in terms of matching supply and demand. We have very small amount of hydropower, less than 2%. And when you look at the renewables altogether, you can see here the split. So out of that 40% renewable energy, nearly 27% of that is wind. So the biggest proportion is wind. Then there's some biomass, and then smaller amounts of solar, biogas, hydropower, and energy from waste. And we've also had a problem that the transmission system has needed upgrading, particularly to bring power from more remote parts like Scotland, to bring power to the main areas of population. And if you look at this, it means that on the UK grid, if you count up the wind power and the solar power, that is more than 30% of our energy generation, our electricity generation, is coming from variable resources, which depend on the weather. So the solar and the wind. And we need still to be able to balance the grid with this relatively high amount of renewable energy. And of course, renewable energy percentage is increasing all the time. So you can see over time, so this is looking back to 1998, and each of these humps is a winter season, and you can see how coal has been phased out. Gas has continued to be an important generation resource, and in more recent times, actually the nuclear power, many of our nuclear power stations have closed over the last 15 years. And so that amount has gone down, and replacing that, we have solar and wind and bioenergy. And also, quite significant for the UK, we have interconnectors to the rest of Europe, and we import electricity. You will also notice that actually the demand for electricity over the last, particularly over the last 15 years, has actually been going down. So this is mainly due to energy efficiency and moving. So also that some manufacturing industry in the UK has closed and has moved elsewhere in the world. So that's quite a different case compared with Indonesia, where you have year on year increasing demand for electricity. And actually, one of the things that happens on the grid is that in the winter time, we tend to get more wind, and that helps to meet the increase in electricity demand in the winter time. So what are the solutions to match these variable loads and the variable generation? So obviously, one is energy storage, but there are also other things that we can do and are done on the UK system. So one is demand side management, where you actually control the loads and get people and industry to turn off loads at times of peak demand. Flexible backup generation, mainly in the UK, that's gas powered. And if we could, also reduce reliance on less flexible generation like coal and nuclear. There is also possibility that when we have too much power generation on the system, that we actually have curtailment. That means that wind farms may be switched off and disconnected when the demand is low and there is a lot of wind on the system. And the last thing is that we can import power via subsea interconnectors. I believe that in Indonesia there is in the pipeline an interconnector between Indonesia and Malaysia, which is planned. So Indonesia might also be in that situation to be able to have an interconnect, import power at times when it's needed, or export it. One thing is that daily demand profiles don't necessarily look like what the UK ones look like. This is from Texas in the UK, in the US. And what you see there is that they actually have very high summer demand because of the climate is hot, very hot in the summer, and a lot of homes and commercial premises have air conditioning. So they have then very high demand each afternoon in the summer. And actually their lowest demand is in the springtime when the climate is more agreeable. And you can see that the load profile, so that's a daily load profile there. The load profile is similar to the UK grid. And what does it look like? Just out of interest, I looked up what it looks like in Indonesia. So you have a fairly even daily load profile. It does have an increase in the evening time, as it does in the UK. So the biggest demand on the system is between sort of 6 o'clock and 9 o'clock in the evening. And unfortunately, that doesn't match very well with the solar profile that you might get. So here down the bottom, you can see an example of a modeled solar output. So if you were to have a lot more solar on your grid, it wouldn't necessarily meet that, help to meet that evening peak time. And we have the same problem in the UK. Solar during the middle of the day and then the highest peak in the evening time. So this is again where energy storage comes into play. Oh, one other thing. Sorry, I added this one in. just to put things in context, this is looking at CO2 emissions over the last, well, from 2005. What I looked at was there was an International Energy Agency report in 2009, which looked at where we needed to get to in terms of CO2 emissions on the system. And it was saying that to reach a maximum of 2 degrees of global warming, we need to be following this green line, which they thought required, in addition to renewable energy, required some carbon capture and storage. Worryingly, where we are at the moment is following this line here, which is meeting what the global pledges so far have been, or the global pledges that were made back in 2009, but it's nowhere near where we need to be to reduce CO2 emissions to control climate change. So this is quite concerning. So we need much faster changes on our electricity systems and in general in terms of the use of energy. So overview of energy storage types. We have basically 3 types of storage. We have storage that we can buffer power by having stockpiles of fuel, or we can have hot water in hot water tanks, which will stay warm. We have mobile storage, which we might need for transport applications, and then we have bidirectional storage that we can connect to the grid. So things like batteries can again be used, thermal storage, hydrogen with a fuel cell and an electrolyzer. I'll explain that system briefly later, and pump storage. So hydropower, where we have 2 reservoirs and we can run the hydro plant in both directions. So in terms of those storage options, there are some others that are mentioned on this chart. This is looking at on the horizontal scale, it's looking at the scale of storage in terms of the capacity, and on the vertical scale, the time over which you can store. And what you see here is the key ones that are used on the grid at the moment. Pumped storage hydro has very large capacity and can store power over days. Whereas batteries, this big blue area here, has capacity which could be quite small, could be quite large, but also the storage time could be over a big range from seconds up to days. And then there are some other options here. Flywheels, which could be a lower capacity and longer duration, or higher capacity and shorter duration. Then if we look at how those work, so pumped hydro storage, as I say, is basically like a hydropower plant, but it has 2 reservoirs. So this is an example in Japan. This is the upper reservoir of the system, and the water will then go down to a lower reservoir, and then when there is lower demand on the system, the water can be pumped back up again. The largest of these in the UK is a system called Norwick. it has a capacity of 1,800 megawatts. So it's quite a big power plant. And the great thing about it is that it can respond to changes in demand quite quickly. So they can run it up to from 0 to full power in either direction in about 15 seconds, which is very fast response time compared with a typical fossil fuel power station. And the key thing is to get, because it's based on potential energy, so it's rho GH, it's density times height difference, MGH, mass times height difference times gravity. So what you want is a high head difference between the two reservoirs, and then you can effectively get quite large amounts of energy storage. And the efficiency of the system, so the losses are in the turbine and the generator. So in the turbine, something like 7% loss, generator 2% loss, and 1% loss in the pipes that run between the two. And you end up then with overall storage efficiency of, you take those efficiencies into account twice, because they work against you in both directions. So you end up with an overall storage efficiency of probably 81%. Not as good as batteries, but still pretty high efficiency. We're talking about storage with less than 20% energy loss. And in the UK, we have 2.9 gigawatts of pumped hydro storage, with a total storage capacity of 27 gigawatt hours. The battery storage in the UK is currently only 2.5 gigawatt. So you can see that's only a tenth of what the pump storage is. But actually, battery storage is growing in the UK system. So pump storage is basically using excess electricity at night and using that to meet the demand at the peaks in the daytime. Actually, the storage, if you look at that 27 gigawatt hours of storage, that represents about a bit less than 1 kilowatt hour of storage per household. So that's how much storage we have in our grid, which is 1 kilowatt hour is quite a reasonable size battery. I think I'm going to move through these quite quickly. So the good things about pump storage: lasts a long time. It's relatively low cost once you've installed it. High investment cost. Difficult to find the best sites. And you can see here, this is an example from the Chinese grid, actually. You pump at night time when the load is low. So this is the daily load curve for commercial and residential. And what it's showing then is you can pump at low demand and generate at high demand. And on the UK system, it's determined a lot by what is the price of electricity at any one time, because we have this market-based system. So here's an example of daily changes in electricity price. So this is running from midnight to midnight the next day, and then into the following day. And you can see there are big changes of price on the system, and including at, in this case, even the price went negative at one point in time. And why did the price go negative? The system forecast that the demand was going to be much higher than it actually was. So probably what happened that day, this was a day in May, probably what happened that day was that they predicted it to be cloudy, and it turned out to be sunny. That means that all the local solar systems on people's houses and on industrial sites suddenly were covering their local demand, and therefore there was less demand on the system than was predicted. And what happens then is that the price suddenly drops because there is more power on the system than is actually required. And also, so important to think about storage in terms of there is big grid storage, but also local storage. So in the UK, there are quite a lot of incentives for people to have storage locally, because if you have storage and you have your own generation, you can then save money and also support renewable energy. So if you have your own solar panels on your roof and you have a battery in your house, you can then use your solar for your own electricity over longer periods. So options for longer term electrical storage in terms of batteries, there is a thing called a flow battery. This is a technology which is now available commercially, but there are only one or two examples around the world where it's been implemented. But it's basically an electrochemical storage, but with flow in the system, so that rather than recharging in terms of electrical recharging, the recharging can be done off-site, so that you this system is good for larger scale storage. There's also a possibility for some thermal storage, and in all of these cases, there's self-discharge. Batteries don't hold all of their electrical storage. Pumped hydro, water evaporates. Thermal storage, heat is lost over longer periods of time. Batteries are now becoming used for grid storage, and they're good for a very large range of time periods. So they're good even for storage at less than 1 second intervals, where you might have sudden glitches on the electricity system. You can actually use battery storage to cover those in time. And in general, at the moment, the most popular is lithium-ion battery storage. And in the UK, grid-connected battery storage increased from 0.5 gigawatt up to 1.7 gigawatt in the last few years. But there are also, in the UK, we now have 600,000 electric vehicles. And if you think about each of those electric vehicles having a battery of 30 kilowatt hour, which is about average size for a car, that means that we have 30 times 0.6, we have 18 gigawatts of storage in those vehicles. So in the future, if we can have electric vehicles that can be connected to the grid and be used as backup for the grid, we could have huge amounts of battery storage available. So that's the sort of vehicle to grid storage technology is something that in the future may be very significant. One thing that's quite interesting is how lithium-ion technologies have developed. So this is looking at storage capacity per unit mass on the vertical scale and per unit volume on the horizontal scale. And this was what was based on lab data back in 2009. And commercial batteries in vehicles are now off the graph. So in the last 10 years, the technology has developed significantly from where it was in the lab to actual commercial technologies. So we've got bigger, we're able to store more power in the same volume and the same mass of battery. And the other thing is that costs have been reducing significantly. So price of lithium-ion batteries have been basically halving every 5 years. And you can see that this was the original chart is a prediction. Actual cost of a battery in 2020 was slightly lower even than the prediction. So the cost of lithium-ion batteries has been falling significantly. And that means that they are now starting to be cost-effective storage backup on the grid. And where are we here? Oh, yes. Flywheels. There are examples of flywheels in use. So these are sophisticated devices. They run in a vacuum. And basically, they have a reverse running electrical machine, normally a permanent magnet machine. So you can get high efficiencies, more than 85% efficiency. And they can be used for quite short-term glitches on the supply. So there's one operating in New York. Actually, surprisingly, if you want to find out where flywheel technology is really developing, it's used in Formula One motor racing. So the racing cars have flywheels in them as energy storage. So this is another option for short-term grid storage. There's also the option of using hydrogen, and there's quite a lot of talk about using hydrogen. So what's happening here is hydrogen is created using electrolysis. So we use electrical power to split water into hydrogen and oxygen. And then we have a fuel cell which can convert the hydrogen back to electricity. And there are some disadvantages to this as a grid storage. It has relatively slow response time, so it's there are some issues if you want to connect it up to the fast changing output from, say, wind turbines. It might not work brilliantly. And the other problem is that the fuel cell side of it is relatively inefficient. So you have overall a low round trip efficiency, maybe only 40% of your input electrical energy can be got out of the system after you've stored it in the form of hydrogen. So although it's a possibility, to my way of thinking, because of the low efficiency and relatively high costs, it doesn't look like a good option right now. I think more likely is that we have hydrogen production on the system and then we use the hydrogen for other things. So maybe for powering large vehicles, buses and trucks. And at the moment, the problem is that actually most hydrogen is not made from electrolysis. It's made from natural gas and has associated greenhouse gas emissions. And finally, in terms of types of energy storage, compressed air energy storage has the problem that when you compress the air, it tends to heat up, and you lose, unless you have very sophisticated systems, you lose that thermal energy when you get the energy back again. So you only have round trip efficiency of 40 to 60%. But there are people looking at more sophisticated system, and one of the professors at Nottingham University looking at airbags that could be put in deep sea for storage of offshore wind power. So those are some of the options for grid scale energy storage. But to my mind, the two key ones which are going to go into the future are batteries, and particularly use of batteries in vehicles for grid backup, and pumped hydro. So before I move to the research bit, having a look at the Indonesian grid mix, at the moment you have most of your grid is dependent on coal or coal and gas. There's relatively little renewables, and what renewables is mainly hydro, bioenergy and geothermal. But in the future, if you have solar, because you have very good solar resource, then you're going to have more intermittent power source on the system, and then you might need more energy storage. Well, one of the things that I noticed about the Indonesian grid, because you have a large amount of coal on the system, the CO2 emissions per unit of energy are quite high. And that means that actually in Indonesia, it doesn't necessarily make sense in terms of CO2 emissions. Using electric vehicles is not that helpful, because you have such high emissions from the electricity that you're using to charge the vehicle that you're not getting the benefit that you would in a grid with much more renewable energy on it. But who knows, in the future, if you can get large amounts of solar onto the grid, then obviously electric vehicles would make more sense. So I wanted to finish just looking at some research projects that I've been involved in. First one is looking at what's the smallest size of pumped hydro storage that makes sense, and could you use it for off-grid community energy? And one of the case studies we looked at was actually in Indonesia, in Irian Jaya, where there's relatively low electrification rates, and we looked at a particular village where there was a reasonable height difference, and you could actually install a mini pump storage system to back up a solar power system. And this, the conclusions we came to was, yes, if you have a community mini grid, you could have a pumped hydro storage system that might be lower cost than batteries, but it's quite site specific, and you need a minimum head of 25 meters. So you need it would be in a mountainous area that this would tend to work. And some of the other work that I've looked at is what happens when you have solar home systems, and when you model systems using Homer, you have an issue that Homer models systems on 1 hour data. So it models the load on hourly blocks, and it models the generation on hourly blocks. Unfortunately, because of the actual changes in solar systems and wind systems, it's not always very accurate. And we found that 5-minute time steps would eliminate the kinds of errors that you get from averaging. And then we also looked at what would happen if you had solar home systems. One of the issues that you have is you have a panel which is big enough to supply the load all the way through the year, but at certain times of the year you have more sunshine and maybe lower load. And in this case, what's happening is the battery is charging up with the first solar in the morning, and then it basically wastes most of the solar energy in the rest of the day. So we were looking at, could you use that extra solar energy for things like running coolers or dryers or agro-processing equipment? But that's really for off-grid. So obviously, if it's connected to the grid, you export that power to the grid. And then finally, a PhD looking at community energy. So a whole lot of houses, with some of which have got solar panels on them, and some of them have got batteries, and you connect them all together and basically use the local distribution grid to help even out the generation and demand within these households. And in this case, it was modeled every minute, and the system used a time of use tariff, which kind of matched the load on the system. So you can see that these kind of time of use tariffs are actually available now in the UK, where you have very cheap nighttime electricity, only 5 pence a unit. This current prices are higher than this. This was done a couple of years ago. Then standard power at 12 pence a unit, but at peak time, in this case, between 4 and 7 in the evening, the price is much higher. It's at 25 pence a kilowatt hour. And you can then have a battery energy management system, which tries to remove all the load coming in from the grid in that peak period. So you don't buy any expensive electricity. And also avoids exporting electricity from the PV panels to the grid. Try to put all of it into the battery. And then there's an issue of how big a battery do you need? And the PhD was basically looking at what's the best way to calculate the battery size to optimize the peak energy cost saving. So yeah, those are some examples of research on energy management. So finally, just a quick summary of what I've covered. So as renewable energy input to the grid increases, we require more storage on the grid. Pumped hydro is at the moment the most cost effective for grid scale storage, but it's limited by the sites that you can do it. Batteries are useful particularly for faster response times, for shorter changes in output and demand on the grid. It's a modular technology, costs are still falling, has high efficiency, and is really important in stabilizing the grid when you have variable supplies like solar and wind. And also useful at household level for if you've got solar panels on your house. And the other technology is really useful for specific applications, and in some cases they might be dedicated to storing power alongside a particular generation. Okay, so I'm going to sorry, no, just do that. I want to close my sharing now. Stop share. There we go.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Arthur, for your presentation. Okay, so yeah, and thank you also for putting Indonesian electricity condition there. Okay, so maybe I will let Mr. Windiarto first, yeah, for the question, because he raised his hand first, and then after Mr. Windiarto explain his question, then I will go back to Slido for the people who put questions in the website. Okay, Mr. Windiarto, can you hear
Okay.
me?
Do you hear my voice?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you very much. Yeah, it's nice presentation, yeah, from Mr. Arthur that have explained about how important energy storage technology could be to the renewable energy. I have heard people refer to energy storage as the big wheel card and a game changer when it comes to integrating for into the grid. And for information, in Indonesia, the big Upper Cisokan pump storage project Paving is being built and will be commercial on that in 2025 that have a capacity of 260 megawatt. But mostly in our country, Indonesia, renewable energy doesn't have energy storage system because implementation of energy storage system is still very expensive. So my question is, how is the policy of using energy storage system in the UK government to overcome this problem? Is there already a technology for using cheap energy storage system in the UK or some regulation for using energy storage technology? Okay, thank you very much. That's my question.
Thank you, Mr. Windiarto.
Okay, so yes, it depends on how really how electricity prices change with renewable energy. So if you the thing with solar is, for instance, that if you can build solar alongside energy storage, then you can then sell your solar energy at the peak times rather than at the only in the middle of the day. And that means then that if you have energy storage alongside solar, so I could imagine that within the Indonesian grid system, what might happen is a lot more local energy storage. So you might have a manufacturing facility where they then build a big solar plant in order to power some of their energy use. It partly depends on what are the ways that the system works. So I know a lot of countries, a manufacturing system company cannot just simply build a solar power plant and connect it to the grid, because that's not part of the way that the system works. Whereas in the UK, it's quite normal. So a factory may have a solar plant or a wind turbine connected to it, and that's supplying some of its own electricity. And obviously, if it has battery storage, then it can supply that electricity at the peak times as well as just in the middle of the day.
Okay, thank you. I hope it answered the Mr. Windiarto question. And yeah, for addition, so in Indonesia, it's the electricity is all managed only by the government. It's called PLN. While in UK, I know that consumer can choose whether picking the A, B, or C option for the electricity. So yeah, it's a bit it's a bit challenging here. Okay, so let's move to the next question from Slido. He didn't put the name. So the question is, Indonesia is known for its nickel reserves. Do you see this an opportunity for Indonesia to implement large-scale energy storage in the form of batteries?
Sorry,
So he
sorry,
said Indonesia is known for its nickel reserves, nickel. Okay, so do you see this an opportunity for Indonesia to implement large-scale energy storage in the form of batteries?
So it only makes sense if you increase the amount of renewable energy on the system. But yes, in terms of if you want to move to more solar on the system, and that at the moment, I don't quite know what the local economics are, but generally in most countries, because of the price of coal and the price of gas, actually building solar systems and connecting solar onto the system, you get cheaper electricity than you do from coal. So, but there's this issue that you don't have the solar power at the time that you've got the high demand. So if you build your solar system alongside energy storage, then it makes sense.
Okay. Yes.
So yeah, I think it you know, it would only go alongside big development of renewable energy in Indonesia, and mostly I see that as solar power is the big thing that's got potential for growth in Indonesia.
Yes, yes, that's right. So here, the biggest solar power plant here is already in, I think it's called in Cirata. Yeah, they have floating PV system there. But here in South Sulawesi, we have already 2 wind power plants. So yeah, but I think there is no energy storage backup, as Mr. Windiarto said. It is expensive in here to produce. Okay, so I want to move to Muhammad Alif Hasyudi, who already raised his hand after Mr. Windiarto.
All right. Do you hear me, sir?
Yes.
All right. I will be continue with my question. There is something I always wonder about because I'm not a energy related student. So I would like to know what else we can do in order to be contributing into pushing our government leading into more renewable sources than sticking into just coal and fossil fuel. So would like to know what else we can do than just reducing our energy consumption. That's pretty much it. Thank you for the time.
Okay, so in terms of reducing energy consumption, that comes down to improving energy efficiency of usage, and that's at quite a lot of different levels. I think in terms of homes, it means kind of moving to LED lighting away from traditional lighting. LED lighting is much more efficient than other types of lighting. In terms of industry, moving towards more efficient motors, variable speed drive systems are key in that way. But a lot of it is also awareness. It's getting people to think about, am I using this energy? Is it really necessary to use it in this way? Or is there a way to reduce energy? So there's a lot of energy reduction that is down to what we might call green choices. You know, awareness, people being aware that if you can reduce energy, you're going to be reducing the emissions from power stations, and yeah, that kind of awareness. But then yeah, in terms of electrical storage, it's really down to being able to enable more renewable energy come onto the grid. Yeah, I think that's I hope that answers the question.
Okay, thank you. I think it is very clear. Okay, for Mr. Alif. Okay, I cannot remember who raised hand first, Mr. Rishan or I think Mr. Rishan. Mr. Rishan, are you there?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you audible?
Okay, I can listen.
Okay, thank you. My name is Rizan. I graduated from Hasanuddin University with master degree in energy, and also I have 16 years of experience working in power plants as employee in the state-owned electricity company in Indonesia. Mr. Arthur, I've learned from your explanation that water storage will be a practical approach to sustainable energy in the future. I would like to know how to prevent issues from arising. El Nino effects cause groundwater reserves to be depleted in Southeast region of Asia, particularly Indonesia, goes through an extended period of drought. And my second question will be, how can I join your research project? I'm very interested in learning about this topic from you, and I'm now looking for a school where I may complete my PhD in the topic of future energy. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, I guess drought conditions could be a problem even for pump storage hydro. If you have too much evaporation from the reservoirs, then it will actually impact on the amount of storage that you're left with. Yeah. There are some smaller scale technologies. So I don't know how much this might apply in Indonesia, but there are some smaller scale technologies where people are looking at pumped hydro using water in mines, in disused mines. I don't know how many disused mines there are in Indonesia already. It might be that most of the coal mines are still operational, but that's one potential technology where you get around that problem of large drag. I mean, basically the pumped hydro, apart from the problem with evaporation, the drought conditions, as long as there is water in the reservoirs, it will still operate. But in terms of hydropower, generally, yes, drought conditions mean that certain times of the year, basically, that won't be available. So I guess part of the answer is to have diverse inputs, and maybe there's potential also in Indonesia for expanding the geothermal energy as well as expanding solar energy. I suspect that wind power in most of Indonesia is tricky because the wind resource is not very good.
Yes. Okay, so yeah, for that dry season here, we usually experience blackout because most of here of hydropower. But yeah, as you said, hydropower may be different with hydro pump. So maybe hydropower is affected by the dry season, but hydro pumps, if you still have water there, then it still works. Yeah. And maybe Rishan can be your research group, he said.
So I don't really have a research group now.
Okay.
But what I can suggest, maybe if you contact me, one way you could contact me through LinkedIn, and we can connect on LinkedIn. There may be other potential. There is actually, I'm going to be talking next week to someone from Salford University in the UK about renewable energy projects, which might link in with things that are going on in Indonesia. So yeah, see if you can connect with me on LinkedIn, and I can try and update you on what opportunities there might be. Would be interested. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir. We'll do that. Thank you.
Okay. For next question, I will prioritize the people who raise their hands. So maybe for Mr. Galip. Are you there, Mr. Galip? Mr. Kaltara?
Yes.
Okay.
Hello.
Yes, you can ask your
Hello.
question to Mr. Arthur.
Oke. Oke, Bu.
My first clear.
Yang mana ini, Bu?
Oh, Mr. Galip.
Hello, hello. Hello.
Okay.
My first clear.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so I'm a chemical student at Hasanuddin University, and what I want to ask is about how can we turn carbon into an energy that is much cheaper, much safer, means safer in environment and much better than any energy that we already know today. So that's my question.
Oh, in terms of new technologies, I mean, I don't see other new technologies really taking over. People talk about nuclear fusion as a future technology. It's still quite a long way off, and I suspect because of the nature of the technology, it's just going to be too expensive. Really, I think most of the solutions are out there. You know, I think solar, if you look at what is the solar resource for the whole of Indonesia, it's amazing. If you really started to put solar panels on every building in Indonesia, you could really reduce the amount of fossil fuels that you use. And the other thing I suspect will come along are new battery technologies. So lithium ion is really dominating at the moment, but there is a lot of research going into other battery technologies. And I think that some of those in maybe 10 years' time, there will be different battery technologies which will be even cheaper and also more environmentally friendly in terms of the materials that they use and the ways that they can be recycled. So I'm still kind of optimistic in that sense, but yeah, I think the other thing is that we need to move very fast in terms of developing renewable energies, particularly in countries like Indonesia.
Yes, I agree with you about putting PV system in each house or maybe a land that is not used. But the tricky part here is Indonesia. The company, the national company, electricity company, only provides in not all of Indonesia for the export and import meter. So yeah, if we don't get the permission, so we cannot put any renewable energy.
Yeah, so it needs some policy changes first.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
So maybe Mr. Rishan and Mr. Wendiarto, who works in the electricity company of Indonesia, can consider to make the change of the policy.
Yes, it's called power wheeling and it's under application now.
Okay. Okay, maybe what time is it? Okay, so Mr. Zul, I give you the opportunity to ask from Mr. Arthur.
Okay, Bu. Thank you for the opportunity. My name is Muhammad Zulkifli Sahar from the Department of Mining Engineering. My question is, how can energy storage technology support the transition to renewable energy that is faster and cheaper than fossil fuels in most regions of the world? What are the challenges and opportunities faced by battery manufacturers in developing energy storage technology that is more durable, more efficient, and more environmentally friendly? That's it. Thank you, sir.
Okay, so actually, in many parts of the world, over the lifetime of the system, solar power is now the cheapest form of electricity. So that's positive. And particularly, I mean, Indonesia has good solar resource. So countries like Indonesia are in a good position to develop solar power. Batteries, as I said, battery costs are coming down. Obviously, there is one other form of energy storage which I didn't mention, which goes along with solar, maybe not so good in Indonesia because you have some issues with cloud cover at certain times of the day. So in the south of Spain, they are using concentrated solar power with molten salt thermal storage, and they can then store the heat from the sun and use that later in the day to generate power at the peak times. And this technology, if it's developed more, costs could come down a bit. We'll see. But yeah, I think it's difficult to know where cost changes go. But generally, in the last few years, solar power has just become cheaper and cheaper, and batteries also becoming cheaper and cheaper, particularly lithium-ion batteries. So yeah, I think it's already cost effective against fossil fuel power generation. I think the main issue that you've got in Indonesia is not the costs, it's the thinking from the power generation and the policy.
Okay, so I hope it answer Mr. Zul's question. I will move to Slido. Maybe this is the last question. Yeah, I cannot because of the time we cannot answer all of the questions. So this is the last question. So energy storage is a new technology for developing countries, meaning it has expensive costs. Will the implementation of energy storage affect the electricity cost?
Yes, I mean, I think the initial place where energy storage will be useful will be more in smaller scale, particularly in off-grid systems. And yeah, I think it's a matter of time really, and partly a matter of if the country develops policies which promote renewable energy, then there's an expanding market for energy storage, and then the costs will start to come down even locally. But you know, the cost of energy storage generally, it has been coming down significantly, so it should be possible.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I agree with you, but yeah, it's so tricky here. So, but I hope for the best and for the electricity cost in reduction also. So maybe because this is the last question from us. So thank you so much for the presentation, and I will give back to the MC, Nurul Inayah, I guess.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Arthur William and Ms. Dianti Utami Dewi, for bringing us to a very productive session today. As an appreciation from Social Renewable Energy SRU Universitas Hasanuddin, we would like to present certificates for Mr. Arthur William and Ms. Dianti Utami Dewi for their time and their valuable contribution to this Energy Talk webinar. Operator, please to display the certificate. Okay, so here's the certificate. All right, ladies and gentlemen, before we close this webinar, may I ask everyone to open their camera because we are going to have a photo session and the operator will take a snapshot. Okay. Okay, I think it's done. Excellencies, distinguished guest participant, ladies and gentlemen, we have had a productive and inspiring time together today, and this event is about to come to the very end. On behalf of SRE Universitas Hasanuddin, we would like to say thank you to all guests and participants for today's webinar. I hope you found this international energy talk informative and helpful. I would like to end today's webinar with these interesting quotes from James Cameron. He said that the nation that leads in renewable energy will be the nation that leads the world. Have a great day, everyone. I'm Andi Nurlaya signing off. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Miss Arthur.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir.